Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Couples Academy Show. My name is Asani, and this is Roderick, and we're here. We're practitioners who have come together to engage in a conversation today. We're actually picking up with part two of our conversation from yesterday. What a good conversation it actually. We were talking about you cheated. You cheated. I don't know who you are anymore. It was a great conversation. The chat was blowing up. So we want to do a part two of that today. But before we get started, make sure you take an opportunity to like, share, and subscribe. We want the world to know that we are live and in the building. And we want you to grab your paper, your pens, sit down with your spouse. Let's get into a good conversation. Listen, before we get started, I always want to reference some testimonials that have come through. Another one from Lakeisha Hines. Our short time with you was very good. Conversations and information giving was great. The work done in and outside of the sessions proved to go a long way. Learned a lot about myself and marriage with you. And I appreciate meeting you and gaining your help and knowledge on marriage and dealing with issues. That's from L. Brown. So once again, to Lakeisha Hines, phenomenal job for being who you are and making an impact in the lives of people. Listen, guys, wherever you're dialing in from, we want to know who you are and where you are so that we can acknowledge you. A couple of announcements. We have the Last Chance Weekend coming up March 10th and 12th. People are starting to sign up. So what about you? What are you waiting for? Get in. We're heading into the second quarter of the year. Around that time, we want to make sure that you are positioned and ready to go to have a phenomenal relationship. Also, we've been talking about this. The Phoenix Award Gala is going to be taking place October 7th, 2023. It is our first annual Phoenix Award. So go to the website, find out more information, get your tickets. It's going to be an amazing event. But let's dive into today's conversation. Once again, you cheated. I don't know who you are anymore. Now, Roderick, you've been working with couples for quite some time. And sometimes when a betrayal happens, the betrayed spouse is in a cloud of confusion. They don't know what to think. They don't know what to believe. They don't understand the nature of their relationship. They begin to question the last 15, 20 years or however long that relationship was. It just keeps them in the space of, I don't know. And that creates a struggle.
Yeah, Sonny, it's if you can imagine waking up from a dream where everything was you control, everything was familiar, everything was even the rough patches in the dreams, you still was aware of it. You were familiar with it. But now when infidelity happens, it's like like you point out a lot, it's a bombshell. So now the betrayed spouse is looking at their spouse like they're a Martian. I don't know who this person is. I can't believe the person I've spent 5, 10, 15 years with would, number one, treat me this way. Nor, would number two, would be somebody that I would spend all that time with. I would love and care and nurture and share my deepest, darkest secrets with. And that can't be that person. That I don't know this person. That's not them. And so you start questioning your own ability as far as, rational thinking, discernment, all these different thoughts come in your head.
It's so interesting you say Martian. Literally, as soon as you said that, I thought about a movie way back in the day called The Breakup. Jamie Foxx was in that movie. And in the movie, his girlfriend breaks up and decides to connect with somebody else. And he literally says in the movie, he says, I don't even know who you are right now. You're like an alien to me right now. And so to your point, yes, it really stumps a person and has them confused. And so what happens is in the process of discovering what is going on and what is happening to my spouse, a lot of research is done. Videos are watched, books are read, articles are sought out. And it seems that, there's this prototype that has been created for what an unfaithful person looks like, what an unfaithful person is. And I want you to shatter any mental construct that you have or belief or idea that you have about what this person is, what they look like, what their background is, because there is no poster child. There is no prototype. kind of tapped into it yesterday, that many people do different things for different reasons. And it's not always based upon specific scenarios. We've said that there are some people who have phenomenal relationships. I mean, everything is there. Great communication, great sex, traveling the world, the money's there, just quality time, date nights, and they still cheat. And then there's other people who literally have almost no relationship at all. They're emotionally disconnected. They don't touch, they don't talk, they don't spend quality time, but for some reason, they don't go down that path. It may impact them in other ways, but they're not doing that. And so I don't think that we can solely look at the relationship. We have to look at what's happening within the person. But even when we look at the person, fact of the matter is you may have two different types of people who cheat. Like, for instance, there are justifications and reasons that some people give to being unfaithful. So, in my research, I came across somebody who said, listen, I never refuse a gift. So space and opportunity, that's all I need. And if the time is right and if the person is right, I'm diving in. And that's their belief system that governs what they do. That's one example of someone who's unfaithful. But then on the flip side, you have individuals who have a serious moral code and a code of ethics that suggests that they would never do it. Yet and still, they find themselves in a place where they've made a decision that they regret because they were vulnerable and they were lonely. Now, they both were unfaithful, but you're dealing with two completely different people. One justifies what they do before they do it, and one has to find reasons and begins to justify it after it's been done. What are your thoughts?
Sonny, you bring up a point that I thought about something my dad taught me or shared with me growing up. And he said that a lock to an honest person, the average person, prevents them from doing something. But a lock to a criminal, a thief, is just another challenge.
Wow.
So when you're talking about the person that's opportunistic, then you're talking about the person that's, everything that they see becomes an opportunity or a challenge for them. When you're talking about the person that has a moral fiber or moral code, then even when the opportunity is there, something inside of them just prevents them from taking that step or from crossing that line. So the opportunistic person they're seeking, they're the hunter, they're out there, looking for that challenge, even though it's not right. That's them, that's their nature. But the person that's get caught up sometimes, that does have that moral fiber and code, there's a little something different for them when they cross that line.
Right. I want you to go back just a second, because that was powerful. Sometimes when powerful statements are made, we just need to sit in it and let it breathe. Now, what did your father say about the lock? Because I want people to really think about their lives and think about other people and think about our approaches to things. Explain the lock again.
Well, he talked about that how a locked door or a lock itself or a locked vehicle, to an honest person, they see a lock. Okay, that's locked. They make the decision, or they make they come to the results that, hey, that's not for me. Somebody locked it for a reason, to keep people out or keep something in. But to a thief, the lock, they just see it as a challenge. Oh, somebody put a lock on there. Let me see if I can pick it. Let me see if I can get in. And they may not even want to steal, but because it's another challenge for them, that lock presents itself as a challenge for them to overcome.
That's something right there. Wow. And we see that even in the context of relationships. Like, there's this thing I want to share, and I want us to talk about. It's called the individual vulnerability map, right? So when we get into the why, because oftentimes the betrayed spouse wants to know why their spouse did what they did. Sometimes the unfaithful person knows, and sometimes they don't. But sometimes when you ask probing questions, the answers that you get from those questions does give insight on where a person is in their heart and mind, their core values, their beliefs, their character, all of these different things that will give us a better understanding as to the why. So I want to read this question, and there's a number of questions. I'm going to read some of these answers, and let's talk about that. Number one, these are questions asked to the person who was unfaithful. Here's the first question, or statement rather. I would feel justified having an extramarital relationship for the following reasons. Okay, now these are the reasons why people have given. Number one, if I feel in love with the other person, that'll justify my reason to cheat. For sexual excitement or sexual variety, okay, that's another reason. To have someone understand my problems and feelings, okay? So the motives and the drives are different, but it gives some insight. Number one, if there's an emotional connection and I feel as if I'm in love, or maybe feelings have nothing to do with it, I'm just looking for sexual frequency and variety because what we do is bland and boring, or just someone to talk to. I don't feel connected to my spouse. I don't feel as if I'm heard. And so this particular person has a listening ear and speaks into me the way that my spouse doesn't. So there's no one reason. We talk about the human body. There's many things that can lead to the death of a body. It's not one thing. There's an incalculable number of things. And here we see three completely different things that contribute to a person's desire. What are your thoughts about that so far?
Well, and Hassani, that may be what some people consider what's scary about infidelity. Mm-hmm. Because even though to some person or some people that use that as justification, let me make the point clear. There is no justification for infidelity. Now, just put it out there. That's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about how the betrayer, male or female, justifies the act of infidelity to themselves. So if they feel like I can talk to this person, they listen to me, they understand, that's the justification, or that's my reason why I cheated. Mm-hmm. The reality of it is that same conversation, that same level of intimacy, if it's focused towards their spouse, they can reach that level and then some, a deeper level, if they put the effort in and refocus that attention to their spouse. If they're talking about the frequency or infrequency of sex is the reason why they stepped out. If they have a conversation with their spouse, and I know sometimes, well, not sometimes, a lot of times sex is a major part of the marriage. It's a crucial part of the marriage. And there's usually one spouse whose sex drive is greater than the other. But when there's a conversation, unless it's something physical, if there's a conversation and there's a willingness for each partner to fulfill the other, then they can find new sexual intimacy. Because sometimes that lack of sex drive is because somebody's being selfish, even in the bedroom. Mm. So, there is no justification. Again, I want to hit that one home. That's not what we're talking about. But when somebody feels they are justified, they're really confused and they're really a coward. I'm just saying they're a coward because they're not facing, or as you put it, Hassani, they're not getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes, very true. Comment came in. Thank you for saying there is no justification. And there isn't. And we want to be crystal clear with that. And so to your point, the person will justify his or her actions in his or her mind, but there's nothing just about it. Certainly there is a reason for it. There is a contributing factor that led to it. But there's no justification. And so I think what's important, just on that note, when one is seeking to understand the why, you have to take your moral cap or moral lens off because that will keep you from understanding it. What you're trying to do is to get into the heart and the mind of the person who engaged in the behavior. And there's nothing right about it. There's nothing moral about it. There's nothing just about it. But if you truly want to understand where the person was at the time of the offense, what was going on inside of him or her, then we have to ask for the purpose of understanding, right? You seek to understand, not to slap a moral position on it, because that's unnecessary. We already know, the person who did it already knows that it was wrong. And so, that's why this is a very delicate conversation that oftentimes can go wrong because of the sensitivity of what has occurred. Here's another question or statement, I should say, and answers that have been given. It says, I'd probably get involved with an attractive person who's interested in me because, number one, I work hard, so I deserve to have some fun. Number two, I wouldn't be hurting anybody else. Number three, it's okay to have sex as long as you don't get too emotionally involved. Number four, it's okay to fool around as long as you don't have intercourse. And number five, it's okay to be emotionally involved as long as there's no physical intimacy. So here we have people determining, everybody has their own moral code for what they do. And I don't want you to think people have zero morality when they're engaged in an affair. Some people will say, listen, I'll do this, but I'm not going to do that. Well, that's based upon their own moral code of what they feel is okay and what they feel is acceptable within themselves. That moral code may be different than yours, but yet and still they have one. And these are the reasons that people have given to justify why certain behaviors are okay. What are your thoughts?
Well, Sonny, I was thinking about, there was a time, I remember listening to the news, and they were talking about a study that they had done with teenagers. Now, granted, the pool was teenagers, but I saw the bigger picture, where teenagers that, they felt like oral sex was not sex. So they felt like, I'm still a virgin. I still fulfilled my moral commitment, because the whole story was talking about the sex pledge. I think that was the topic of it. Mm-hmm. And to your point, if your moral code says that XYZ is not cheating, or XYZ is not betraying anyone, then that's the code you're going to live by. And when somebody challenges that code because they have a different code, that's where the disconnect is going to take place. I remember hearing you and Danielle talk about this yesterday, sitting down, having a conversation and clear definitions about what our marriage code is, mm-hmm. what's our bylaws, basically. And that question you just asked is a great example of why that's important. Because if I'm feeling one thing about a particular thing and my spouse is feeling another thing about it, when the violation occurs or either part, then there's a problem.
Yeah. I remember years ago what you're referencing in terms of oral sex amongst teens, mm-hmm. and how they, in their own minds thought that it wasn't sex, or because it wasn't penis and vagina intercourse. And so, you talk about the amount of sexual activity skyrocketed amongst young people because of their definition. And it's interesting. It was around that time, if I'm not mistaken, it may be connected to the same thing. I remember when our former President Clinton, was involved with Monica Lewinsky, and that was a huge scandal. And, he was just like, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. They didn't have sex, but there was oral sex. And so that became the new definition. That became the new justification. And it didn't only impact young people, it impacted people. And so a lot of relationships, a lot of marriages ultimately, unfortunately, were hit with all of this bad behavior, because if the person who's our leader, the leader of the free world, he has the highest seat in the land, if it's okay for him, or if what he did wasn't that bad, then me doing it can't be that bad either. And there was a shift culturally in terms of societal norms when it came to monogamy and fidelity and what we determined was cheating and not cheating. I remember that time. Here's another statement. The following statements reflect my beliefs about life, right? This is interesting. I thrive on risky new adventures. It goes back to the whole, the way we look at the lock, right? It's an opportunity. So I thrive on risky new adventures. Number 2, rules are made to be broken. Wow. Number 3, forbidden fruit is sweeter. And number 4, beginning a project is always more interesting than finishing it. Wow. Now that could speak to marriage, one's commitment in the marriage. But these are statements, and it's not like they're specific to relationships, but these are belief systems or governing principles of how we live our life, and how we do anything is how we do everything. So if that's how I approach one area of my life, it may impact how I approach another area of my life.
Well, and Hassani, that makes me think about the whole courting or the dating aspect of a relationship. There's a lot of things, a lot of perpetrating that goes on during that. But if you're paying close attention, you would notice the little nuggets, like this person seems to be a thrill seeker. This person seems to be a rule breaker.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, if they live that way in one part of their life, how does that apply to relationships? Or how does that apply to business or parenting, other aspects of their life? The signs are usually always there. It's just sometimes either the betrayer finds a great way of hiding them or covering them up, or the other person, and like I say, we're not talking about just marriages, we're talking about relationships. The other person in the relationship chooses not to see them or recognize or acknowledge them. But it goes a long way if, to your point you made, a challenge is just a challenge to a person who's looking for a challenge that thrives off of that. When the newness is gone, their drive, their attraction is gone.
This is why it's important, even outside of relationship specific questions, taking a deep dive and really getting to know who you are and who your spouse is critically important. And this is why we encourage work days, because in that work day, you have sacred space and time that's uninterrupted, fully focused to just engage in conversations about life, about a number of different things, beliefs, philosophies, ideas, ways of viewing and seeing the world. How do you respond in crisis? What is your response to this? Like, just general questions. And if you don't know the questions to ask, there's so many great books where you can really, like 1,001 questions to ask your spouse. Like, they're out there. They're not all relationship specific, but just, what are your thoughts about faith? What are your thoughts about death? What are your thoughts about adventure? What are your thoughts about, pursuing something new, a new career? And in that, you really get to understand who a person is. And I think it's critically important after an affair, because you've lost your sense of certainty about who that person is. And you want to gain that sense of certainty back. And doing a deep dive and really unpacking these things will get you to at least to an understanding of who you're dealing with, and hopefully into alignment. Listen, guys, stay there. We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back to continue this conversation. You're watching the Couples Academy show with Hassani and Roderick. Stay right there. All right, guys, you're back. Well, we're back and hope you're enjoying this conversation. It's always good to connect with you. You're a veteran. You're the general. You give wise advice. The things that you say are just like bombs that are dropped that really make us think and reflect. And I hear from the people that you work with the amazing job that you and your wife are doing. So thank you for being a part of the team. We're glad to have you as a part of what we do. We're continuing in this conversation. We've been reading some statements and the responses that go along with it. This is the final statement that I'm going to read. It says, the following statements reflect how I feel about my relationship. Now, we're talking about people who have engaged in an affair where they may be relationally in their minds. Number one, I feel uptight if my partner tries to get too close to me. You know, it's interesting when a person is involved in an affair, there's a heightened emotion for the other and a decreased emotion for the one you're in a relationship with. Sometimes, many times, not always, but that's an indication. You know, if I'm going to physically be with someone, me being with you physically either completely turns off or significantly slows down. The second statement, I feel anxious and rejected if my partner ignores me. So because you don't give me any time, any attention, that then becomes my justification to go out and to get from someone else what I'm not getting here, which speaks to the marital void. And number three, I'm most comfortable being alone. I have little need to spend time with my partner. That's an indication. You know, a lot of times there's a separation, there's a disconnect, not just emotionally, but physically. You're in your space, I'm in mine. You're doing your thing, I'm doing mine. I go out when I want, you go out when you want. And so when we start seeing these patterns as an indication, possibly that there's something else that's going on. What are your thoughts about these statements?
Well, the statements remind me of, you know, you're isolating yourself. And you're isolating yourself because usually there's a guilt factor. There's a guilt factor when you're involved in infidelity. There's a guilt factor for the betrayer because he or she knows in the heart of hearts that what they're doing is wrong. So for me to spend time with somebody that I love, that elevates that level of guilt that I'm feeling. So it's just much easier for me to isolate myself and separate myself, so I don't have to feel that guilt as much. And then, of course, when that spouse, that betrayed spouse, is showing some type of affection towards the betrayer, again, that guilt elevates itself within them. So now it becomes, instead of looking internally and blaming themselves, now I'm looking external. It's your touch, it's your words, it's how you respond or don't respond. And that, like you said, that slight argument that the betrayed spouse creates or snap, that is a way of escaping, and then it becomes a justification of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because again, that betrayed spouse it's a selfish act.
Yes.
It's all about me, me, me. So because of that, I have to make me feel good.
Very true. Very true. Listen, I'm reading the chats and people are saying they're really enjoying this conversation, how it's so needed and giving them insight on what's happening in their home. Listen, I hope you got something out of today's conversation. It seems as soon as we get started, it comes to an end. It's just a short 30 minutes, but if it's your daily dose to get you through the day, if it's something that you can engage in terms of a conversation with your spouse and then kind of work through things, talk through things, hopefully it's been helpful. We would encourage you to watch it and re-ask these questions to one another. Get some insight about who your partner is. We're all about the healing process. We're all about your restoration. And so if you need help, reach out to us. Go to our website, couplesacademy.org, or send us a text at 678-200-8996. But until then, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day and enjoy. Take care.